Welcome everybody to the monthly movie dispatch, the show that we do weekly. Uh, sorry, the movie review show from friends that you can trust. Every week we broadcast a review of a new film, talk about some film news, and recommend what to watch. We've been talking, critiquing, and gushing about movies since we were young tykes in high school. We aim to bring you honest conversation about relevant cinema. And honestly, we just love talking about movies. I'm Nick Moffat, and I'm here with Shaun Bolby. What's happening, Shaun?
Hey, not a lot. Just hanging out.
Nice. Just hanging out, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm pretty eager to talk about the movie today. Today we're going to be talking about Candyman, the new horror movie by director Nia DaCosta.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of these legacy sequel from
Yeah.
I think the first Candyman came out in the early 90s. I
Yeah,
think 91, something like that.
92 or so, yeah.
92. And yeah, I think there were three in the initial run, and then this is kind of one of those legacy sequels. And,
Yep.
spoiler alert, I think it was done right. I think this is kind of
Yeah.
pretty cool way to do a sequel. But
Yeah, definitely.
before we get into the show or going into our review, I kind of wanted to, spend a few minutes talking about a few other things. But first of all, I want to talk about the director, Nia DaCosta.
Mm-hmm.
She's just up and coming director. She's a black woman. I think this is her second movie. Her first one being it was called Little Woods.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen or heard of Little Woods?
I have not, and yeah, I don't remember hearing about it until after being aware of this Candyman. So yeah, I missed that one.
I saw it. When it came out. It came out like 2 years ago, I think 2018, 2019, around there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, it was a small drama. It was pretty. I wasn't blown away by it, but it was kind of one of those movies where you watch it and you're like, okay, this director has promise.
Mm-hmm.
Not my favorite movie, but there definitely was like skill and some cool stuff and some important themes that they were working with, great acting and stuff. But
Nice.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't my it wasn't my favorite movie that year, not even close. But it was solid.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to take a minute to celebrate her because she was the first black woman to open the box office at number one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's shocking and impressive.
Shocking that she's the first after
Yes.
all this time.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's kind of funny because we're still in the pandemic like time frame. The box office all sorts of wonky a little bit right now still. The movie opened with $20.4 million.
Yeah.
Funny enough, she actually she's the first number one, but she's the second highest. I'm sorry. This movie, Candyman, was the second highest domestic opening from a black woman, but the other one being A Wrinkle in Time. So Ava DuVernay's Wrinkle in Time actually grossed more its opening weekend, but it was still number two behind Black Panther, which was still in a dominating run.
Yeah. Interesting.
The year that came out.
Yeah. And just for context, though, too, I believe the budget for this movie was around $20 million. Whereas I'm sure Wrinkle in Time was hundreds of millions or over 100 million for sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Wrinkle in Time was kind of considered a bomb because it did not make as much as its budget.
Yeah, but this one it's seeming, in spite of COVID era, it's seeming to be a success at the box office, assuming there isn't a huge drop off.
Yeah, I mean, even at this point, I think just how much it made opening weekend, if that's its box office gross, I think it's doing pretty good, because it's not even considering the home rentals and all of that. It's it's pretty interesting though. I mean, Ava DuVernay was, just bring it back to her really quick. She was the first black female director to helm $100 million movie.
Yeah.
So even though it was a bomb, she was the first one to ever do it. And Nia DaCosta, her next movie after Candyman is going to be The Marvels. So she's going to do a Marvel movie after this, the sequel to Captain Marvel,
which seems to be every young independent filmmaker's career trajectory these days. You do a successful small indie movie, and then you jump onto a Marvel movie.
It is a pattern.
Yep.
I don't hate it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. There's Chloe Zhao and now this one. Yeah,
I mean, we're not here to talk. We're not here to talk about Marvel,
Yeah.
but there is something about that strategy
Mhm.
in that it's interesting because Marvel, all of their movies kind of look the same,
Mhm.
and all of their action scenes are kind of
Yeah.
similar style. And I often think that they might have other people directing the action, and they might bring in
Yes.
these indie directors to do the
Mhm.
acting and the
Yeah.
working with actors and the tone of the movie more
Mhm.
so than anything else. And I think you could see that in movies like Black Panther
Yeah.
and
Like Thor Ragnarok and
yeah.
and hopefully the Eternals and the Marvels. I know nothing about the Marvels, but yeah,
Yeah, I
I'd
know a
like to
bit,
see
but
some thematic and some kind of visual experimentation would be nice in the Marvel movies.
yeah. I mean, we'll see. I mean, I'm most looking forward to Eternals to see how that
Definitely.
to see how much of Chloe Zhao's style shines through in the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
But enough about the MCU. We don't need to talk about that today. I'm really excited to talk about this movie that we're going to talk about today. I'm kind of struggling a little bit. We talked about this off mic, and the whole
Yeah.
thing about Seaman is that you're not supposed to say his name looking in the mirror. You say his
Yeah.
name 5 times, he shows up and kills you. And we're not looking at a mirror right now, but we're looking at
Yeah.
computer screens. I can see myself in it.
Yeah.
So
I
we
might
should
have
probably
to
be
cover
careful.
myself up with a piece of paper or something.
I think I'm just gonna
Like
say
that.
Seaman from now
Okay.
on. Just to be safe about
Yeah.
it.
We'll trick him. We'll trick him.
Don't say his name.
We'll say
Don't say his
Seaman.
name. But yeah, I wanted to bring up a couple other things that you ever see those tweets going around that are like, I don't know if you ever even go on Twitter, but there's that thing of how I know you haven't seen this movie, this is how. And one of those tweets that was going around were people complaining about how Seaman, this new one, is too political. And it's like, well, how do I know you haven't seen the original one? This whole series is steeped in political themes. It's very
Definitely.
much a series about racism and the struggles of Black people and the I mean there's a lot to unpack with all these movies. And before we move on from talking about Nia DaCosta, I just wanted to bring up an article that she was interviewed by The Guardian, and The Guardian was talking about, in this article, she was talking about how when she was on set, she actually did experience some racism, even though she was the director and the person that's kind of in charge. And the producer of the movie was Jordan Peele, but apparently those were the only two Black people on set besides the actors. I don't want to say on set, but they were the two people in leadership roles.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of other mostly white people on set, and there's a there's a theme in this new Seaman movie about artists, and the main character is an artist, and it's like just to quote the Guardian article that I have here, the other key target of DaCosta's Seaman is the art world, which is presented as an exclusive, money-fueled realm policed by white critics, agents, and gallerists. To boost his appeal, Anthony is encouraged to incorporate more hood themes in his art. Could we draw parallels with the film industry here? And she went on to say, it's not necessarily overtly racist, but it is shocking the way people have talked to me in my position as a director, people who work for me, especially on a movie like this, where Jordan was the only other person of color at the level of decision making on the movie. And that's unacceptable, frankly. She talks about crass comments about Black hair. She recalls a time she was outside waiting for her assistant one night, and a white male crew member jokingly asked if she was hooking to make money on the side. And these are, these are kind of what you call microaggressions. These are like small things that people think are jokes, but really it's subtle racism. And it just, it's surprising seeing that from someone who's, I mean, she's the boss. She's in charge.
Definitely. That's super shocking. I mean, coming at this as a white person, maybe I'm, kind of ignorant to a lot of the way people are treated, but that is super shocking, especially being on film sets frequently, and people at higher up levels, you definitely have a level of respect, and it's shocking that someone would talk to their boss that way, at any point.
Yeah. And I think the bigger thing that I kind of wanted to bring up before we get into this review is that me and you, we are two white guys.
Yeah.
And I was kind of talking to my wife about whether or not me and you should actually review this movie. Like, are we the voices that should be broadcasting a review of this movie that's for Black people, made by Black people? And I mean, basically, at the end of the day, like, our podcast is not big enough, doesn't draw people, like, isn't going to turn the needle on anything. It's okay that we're talking about this movie. And especially because I think we have mostly positive things to say. And I mean, and it's okay to critique things even if we don't have positive things to say. But I think that it's important to acknowledge that we aren't... we have our we have our limitations, and we're trying to understand the culture that this movie is for. And I don't want to speak for that culture because I'm not from that culture, but I think this movie's pretty great, and I'm excited to talk about the themes of this movie and the horror aspects of this movie as well.
Yeah, definitely. And my approach to this is that what we're doing on this podcast, and the way I've always seen our podcast is, and even like the name of our podcast, the Monthly Movie Dispatch, is more for trying to show and talk about what movies we think people should see and what movies we think, people should be talking about. And we are certainly far from, the people who should be really examining the movie and its effect on culture and how it's reflecting culture and the world around us. We're far from experts in those subjects, but I think what we can do, and what I think, is just what we always do with any movie, is just talk about what we like about the movie and talk about whether or not we think people should see this movie, and then probably explore a little bit of what we liked about it and talk probably a little bit about its themes. But I'm definitely really not going to try to dig into what this movie means to anyone or what it says about society as a whole, or where it's certainly not where it's coming from.
Sure, but I mean, I think this movie is pretty explicit in some of its themes. I think we can talk about some of the themes and how it's pretty obvious what some of the things they're where they're coming from. And I mean, also I think it's important to say that this franchise is from what I've understood, I've seen documentaries, I've read a lot about horror movies, I'm a big horror movie fan. From what I understand, Candyman, the original one, is very important to the Black community because I mean, he's one of the only horror icons, or icons in pop culture, especially from the 90s, who's a Black man.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, over the last few days, I've read and watched quite a bit about the Candyman franchise. I just, this movie got me really interested in it, and it's and then I actually watched for the first time the first Candyman a few days ago, which I very much enjoyed, and it's a very interesting movie. But kind of the history of that movie is it's based on a Clive Barker anthology book series. So it was a short no, I'm not sure if you'd say a short story or a novella, but it's a part of this anthology, and originally it was set in Liverpool in England, and the Candyman was not a black character. It was kind of described as almost, I don't know, maybe a more demonic type looking character. And it was meant to explore kind of folklore and urban legends, as well as mainly classism in England. And then who was the writer director of the first one? It was Bernard Rose, who is from Liverpool. Took that source material and applied it to Chicago. The Cabrera Green district in Chicago, where the movie takes place, and he kind of decided to have the Candyman character be a black man. Are you keeping track of how many times I've said it yet, Nick?
Yeah, I was actually going to warn you. You're getting pretty close. I think you're at like 4, so you better watch out, Shaun. You better watch out, man.
I'm not going to make it. I'm going to forget, and I'm not going to make it. I know.
Oh no.
All right, I'm not looking at myself now though. Okay. But anyway, so yeah, so it's kind of interesting how that all came about, and how I guess that it kind of took that turn, and he brought in a lot of racial themes and ideas, and but it certainly is still from the white perspective. It's a white woman doing I guess her thesis on urban legends and the Seaman. There
you go.
The Seaman folk tale, or the urban legend that was going around in this black community.
Right, because in a lot of ways it's like still a white savior movie.
Yes, definitely.
Right, even though this movie is very important, the original was very important to the black community, it still had some tropes and some ideas that are rooted in like kind of subtle racism.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's all throughout the movie as well. There's some kind of sexual,
Well, isn't the movie about like an artist who doesn't he like paint or dates a white woman, and then he's like killed, and that's the Candyman or something from that one?
The first one is just about this woman who is who is writing her thesis about urban legends, and she, for her thesis, is researching the Candyman, or the legend of Candyman, and she is going throughout this Cabrera Green neighborhood and talking to people, and just trying to find out more about it, about this myth, and then she kind of gets sucked into the myth, and
I thought that's what the myth was. I thought the myth was an artist who had like been with a white woman and was like killed, and the Seaman was his ghost or something.
I believe a sequel, like the third one, I think had something to do with an artist. But definitely not this one. There wasn't really much art aside from graffiti in the first one. And it actually is in the new Candyman movie, they tell pretty much her whole story, but from almost from the perspective of the community, rather
Right.
than, so like in the original, she's a much more sympathetic character, and where she is clearly
And that's
being,
Virginia Madsen's character.
yes, Helen, I think, is the character's name, which, don't say her name 5 times either. And but yeah, so it's you get pretty much her whole story, and she's the one who, well, maybe we don't get too into spoilers.
Yeah, we don't need to get too we don't need to get too into it, but I did want to bring up like how even though like I haven't seen any of the other Candyman movies, this was my first one, the 2021 version, but one thing I loved about this version was how it played with mythology.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it very much was, you know, you're just to kind of reiterate what you're talking about. There's an early scene in this movie where, yeah, they're in the Cabrini Green neighborhood, which in the first movie where it took place in the same neighborhood, but it was mostly just the projects.
Mm-hmm.
And in this movie, the projects are torn down and there's luxury condos that are built up, which echoes real life. And there's a scene where one of the main character's brothers, he tells the story of this woman you're talking about, Helen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, he's like, you want to hear a scary story? It reminds me of that horror movie that me and Derek saw last year, Scare Me, where the movies later like telling scary stories to each other, but they do this cool how would you describe that? It's like this cool, it's not a montage, but it's like it's almost like an animated kind of storytelling.
It's like shadow puppets.
Yeah.
But like the shadows are, you know, you almost might see not shadow puppets, in that they're not
hand puppets, or like hand movements,
they're
like
not
shadow
hand puppets.
I think
They
shadow
are
puppets
like,
is,
yeah, I guess they're shadow puppets, but they're like they're almost like cut out of paper, some kind of paper, and moved by hands, and you can see all the, you know, there's like little wires going to the cutouts to manipulate them, and you can
it's
see
a very
hands.
stylized way of telling this story.
Really cool and really creepy.
And it's a way of like building in mythology. Like they're talking about this thing that happened in the same neighborhood like years ago, and I mean that's the kind of the catalyst to get the main character involved and interested in the movie. But there's a few other times in the movie where they play with the same kind of concept, and not just with that story that happens in the first movie. They imply that Seaman goes a lot further back. There are instances of Seaman throughout the history of America, basically, and they go over a few of them, and then, you know, I don't want to. It's not really spoiled. The end credits is very stylized as well. In the end credits, they go over some more of these potential Candyman situations. Yeah, and it's like it's a very cool, beautiful style. Like again, super stylized. It's like it's one, but honestly, like top 5 end credits I've ever seen. Yeah, like it was a really cool end credit sequence, and it just added more to the mythology of Seaman and what he could be, and how he could be out there, and why he's out there too.
Definitely. We're not even into our review yet, though.
I know we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but I had just another real quick quote here from that Guardian article where Seaman is where's that quote? I don't know. Actually, I don't have it in front of me, so never mind. But it's, I don't know. I don't have it in front of me. But I just think that's part of what I was talking about when I was saying a legacy sequel. Like I just really liked how they incorporated the first film, the previous versions of this movie, as canon in this movie.
So I will also say my understanding is, so the book never gives Seaman a backstory, and doesn't really give him any kind of origin, and certainly not the origin that the movie gives. The first movie is what gave him that with a white woman, the painter who falls in love with the white woman. Oh wait, is that what you were talking about?
That's what I was talking about.
Oh, so that's like the old, like from the early 1800s. Sorry, I thought
That's
you
what
were
I was
saying,
trying to say, was that
yeah,
the Seaman myth
uh-huh.
was like
Yeah,
this.
okay. That I was super confused. Uh, so yes, that's not the story of the first Seaman movie. That's just
The backstory of the character,
backstory
though.
of the character that they
Yes.
explain in the first movie.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I was trying to talk
Yeah.
about. That's what I was
Yes,
trying to
yes.
say. That's the backstory of
Yes.
Seaman.
But I believe the next two movies are actually not really canon in this movie.
I feel like they could or couldn't be. They just take place somewhere else, right?
Yes,
The second one takes place in New Orleans.
I believe there's a couple contradictions especially with how he got his name, which, that obviously that does make sense with folk legends and folk tales.
Well, they kind of allude to that in this movie. Like in this movie, there's that scene towards the end where he's going, he's saying there have been many different Candyman. And he alludes that there wasn't just this one that you're dealing with right at this moment. There's a whole history of them, and
that's true. But
again, it's just to me, it's like folklore, it's mythology, it's whatever you want. So maybe
it doesn't explicitly. But I don't think it's really this movie makes the sequels a part of it. And my understanding is that the sequels largely become, all the gore without any of the meaning or purpose. They largely do away with the kind of the thematic undertones of the original. And
I mean, that's any horror sequel, honestly.
Sure.
I mean,
I just wanted to point that out. That
totally.
And I've even heard that, especially the third one, it can be skipped. So,
well, we got to get to the review of this movie. I know we've been kind of beating around the bush a little bit on talking about aspects of it, but we should, let me just set the table for it really quick. Like I said, this movie is Candyman. It stars Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, Tiona Paris, and Nathan Stewart Jarrett, a few other people too. The plot summary: Anthony and his partner move into a loft of the new gentrified Cabrini. After a chance encounter with an old-timer exposes Anthony to the true story behind Seaman, he unknowingly opens a door to a complex past that unravels his own sanity and unleashes a terrifying wave of violence. So we saw this in theaters. I think it's only available in theaters right now.
I believe so, yeah.
So, I mean, we've already been talking about a lot of the themes and going around it, but yeah, Shaun, I thought this movie was pretty great. I picked this movie because it had great trailers. I really like supporting Black artists, Black movies, and I love horror movies. So that's why I picked this movie. But, I didn't think this was necessarily the scariest movie ever. Like, I don't think it reached the levels of like Hereditary or other like modern classic horrors.
His House, that came out last year.
His House was probably better than this, but
or at least scarier. I was terrified.
Sure.
watching
His House was very scary, but so I didn't necessarily think this one was that like bone chilling scary, and they didn't use any jump scares at all, which I appreciated. Not the biggest fan necessarily, but I still did think it had some really good visuals. I thought the tone was pretty unsettling the entire time. Some cool gore, some interesting visual effects, and like we've been talking about already for 20 minutes, the themes of this movie echoed out. And I thought the themes kind of elevated this into something that was pretty special.
Absolutely. I totally agree with everything you said. I even think I think people have said several times that this is not only just a good sequel, but it really adds to and builds upon the original in some really interesting ways. And one way is I actually think that Seaman is a lot more grounded in this movie, in that the way that he's portrayed is a lot more consistent, I guess. Whereas in the first one, he was just kind of there and anywhere and everywhere, and he could be seen by the camera and by anyone who was around. And he didn't really seem to have a whole lot of rules to him. Whereas in this one, I loved the decision to make it so not even the audience could see him unless he was in a mirror, or unless it was a reflection of him. And
there were some really cool scenes where someone would see him in the mirror, but then they would like leave the room, and then the other person in the room would get killed by him, but it'd be like let's say he like picked someone up by the neck, they would just like float up into the sky, and then their neck would like crack or something. Like there were some really cool visuals
for
using
sure.
like invisible kind of technology,
and it made for some really great, scary, really intense moments where you never know where he is or where he's gonna, what mirror or what reflection he's gonna pop out of. And I think like to compare it to The Invisible Man, where it was just like some really cool, I don't want to say fight sequences, and especially Invisible Man was a lot more actiony, but where it just seeing someone be killed by an invisible being is just really scary and really visually striking to see. And I thought it was a really great decision, and made for some really fun, but cringy kills in this movie.
They played with the concept in some interesting ways too. Like there was that scene in the bathroom where there was like 4 girls who said his name 5 times in the bathroom, and then they're like, nothing happened. And then they kind of started bullying this other girl who came into the bathroom after them, and the girl went into the stall and put her headphones on, and then the door was locked, and then one of the 4 girls that said his name walked back over to the mirror and then just like was killed off screen, and you could like see blood dripping, and like they just played with that sort of image of like, just don't go in front of the mirror, but these girls like couldn't help themselves. And but then there was another girl, one of those girls had a makeup kit, and she could see him in the mirror of the makeup kit. It's like little things like that where like what you're talking about, the movie had rules, he had rules that he was following, but the characters still stumbled into them.
Yes, definitely. And I think it really made for some. The other one that really stands out is when he gets into the elevator that's just covered in mirrors. And as soon as he walks in, you just know that you're in for some big scares, and it's going to be really intense. But that was the kind of stuff that this movie did really well. Just a really deft hand as a filmmaker. And it just, it was just a super cleverly put together movie in virtually all aspects, I thought.
Yeah. Do you want to get into spoilers a little bit? Because there's a few things I want to talk about specifically. At this point.
I sure. Yeah, let's get into spoilers.
If you have other things...
I definitely really liked the movie. We already talked about some of touched on some of the themes.
Totally.
But this movie definitely expands upon them, and I think even makes them more interesting in a lot of ways, and makes it, the first one, as interesting as it was in its themes, it did also have some problems with it for sure. This one really seemed like they knew what they were doing and what they wanted to do with it and where they wanted to take it for a today's audience, and especially for the audience that they were going for. In some articles I read today, they talked a lot about how this and actually Get Out largely, in a lot of ways, started it. That these are movies. Horror movies for a black audience, and so you don't have like your Luke Skywalker character who needs to introduce the white people into this black community. or you don't have need to have that white character introducing you. It's because it's not necessarily directly for that white audience that doesn't have an understanding of what this movie's about. And yeah, I think that makes for a much more interesting, well, in its own, it's certainly, the first one was interesting in its own way, but especially for today's world, it makes for a much more interesting experience.
I mean, I think the movie was like kind of heavy-handed with some of the themes they were talking about. I mean, for example, like gentrification, that was like a pretty big theme in this movie, and they had a conversation about gentrification right at the start of the movie. And I appreciated the conversation. I thought it was great. And they kind of broke down how it happens and how they're like I said, the main character is an artist, and they kind of go over how artists kind of speed up gentrification sometimes, but that's also because the government's helping them speed it up sometimes. It's like
the one, I forget which character it was, but they say that it's the artists who are moving in and taking the neighborhoods from the impoverished, minority communities. Whereas, it's these policies and systematic racism that has, anyways. Yeah, that was a really interesting conversation.
Yeah. And then another big theme that kind of echoes through the movie is like generational trauma, which like I don't really want to get into right now because I feel like that's partially a spoiler, but it's something that, for me at least, being able to, hey, I saw this horror movie over the weekend, and then tell people, like my parents, I was telling my family that I saw Candyman, but I'm able to like talk about relevant, important themes that are going on in the world. And like my dad was like, what's generational trauma? And I kind of gave me an opportunity to talk to him about what that means.
Yeah.
So I just really love when horror movies do this, when they use horror as a vehicle to tell
definitely
a story about
seems like we're getting a lot
else.
of that right now too.
I think horror has been like that for a long time. Like I think it kind of comes and goes, but you're right. Like there have been a slew of those lately.
Yeah. For sure.
Cool. So should we go into spoilers a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So from this point on, spoilers. Wait, real quick, Shaun, what would you give this movie?
Oh yeah.
As stars.
Yeah, I'd go 4.5. I really liked it. There's like, I guess I will say there was a couple bits and pieces that I thought maybe were a little clunky, maybe a little, some scenes that felt a little stiff, a little bit in performance and a little bit how they were kind of shot and put together. But so maybe that, I would definitely say high 4, maybe. Over time and actually as I've been like thinking about the movie and kind of researching the history of the series, it's definitely bumping more up into a 4.5 for me. So
yeah, I'm a solid 4 right now, but I highly recommend it for anyone who likes horror movies.
Definitely,
for sure. So after this point on, let's spoiler conversation from this point on. So, Shaun, one of the big things with this movie, the main character, his name is Anthony, played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. I thought he did a really great job. So he was they reveal it later on, halfway, 2/3 of the way through the movie, that in the first Candyman movie, which I haven't seen, that you just watched, there's a baby that's almost thrown into a fire. And they talk about that baby. They talk about that story at the beginning of this Seaman movie. And turns out he is that child, right? So he has a history with this mythology.
Yes. And I think you might have, if you had seen the first movie and were, kind of knew it well, you might have been able to see that coming, because the baby is named Anthony in the first movie. And
so maybe it wasn't a spoiler as much.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of felt like it was a spoiler because the movie, like the movie kind of was built as a mystery a little bit. Like you didn't know, he was trying to figure out
Yeah.
he was like investigating, similar to the first movie, it sounds like, the myth, and he kept getting deeper and deeper into it. And there were actually some parts where the people that were dying were people that were like bothering him or close to him, like the art
Hmm.
gallery owner who was
Yeah.
rude to him, the critic who was writing a terrible review of him. And there were these are the people that are dying, and they kind of did the horror movie thing where you're like, maybe he's actually the one that's killing them, maybe Seaman
Hmm.
doesn't even necessarily exist or something. And then no, it's like blatant that he is, he is a deadly monster,
Yes,
a ghost or
definitely.
whatever.
Yeah. Um, yeah, but it's also interesting because the story that is told in the 2021 Candyman. Oh, that might have been 5 times.
Yeah.
And I have myself up on the screen. All right, it's over. I'm done for. I might as well just embrace it.
We could just
Um,
be like the people in the movie that get killed, like, nothing happened.
yeah,
We're okay. We'll be
yeah.
fine.
Um, but the way it's told in this new Candyman is actually different from how the movie is, the first movie. So that especially in the ending, it's the scary story is told slightly differently in this one. So I thought that was really interesting, and it kind of adds to this idea that these urban legends are very fluid, and they're passed down in an oral tradition, and kind of change and become something different over time. Um, so I thought that was an interesting little tweak that they did for it.
Yeah, I love the ending of this movie and how it was like that. Yeah, there's a few aspects of police brutality that echo out through this movie. A few examples that happen in this, and part of the ending is, you know, the cop basically puts um um puts Teona Paris's character in the cop car and is basically
Mhm.
like, your boyfriend did this, but either you admit, you tell us everything that happened, or we're gonna say you were an accomplice. And
Mhm.
then he like came back from the dead, like he turned into Candyman and just
Yeah.
like slaughtered like 10 cops or whatever,
Yeah.
and in pretty brutal fashion. And I just thought that was a really great ending.
Yes.
Um,
I I've said this. I feel like I've said this a few times in recent reviews, but god damn it, this movie knew how to fucking end.
yeah.
That was, oh god. Yeah, just that whole scene, the way it plays out, and kind of even the slow realization of like what she was doing, and how it worked, and how kind of the reveal of how she was hoping for it to work. And then yeah,
Mm-hmm.
those all those kills were great. And
Right,
then
because the Candyman showed up because she was saying his name in the
yeah,
mirror.
yeah,
She was kind of playing the cop, being like, "I'll
yeah,
tell you everything. Just let me look at myself in the
yeah,
mirror."
yeah,
Oh
definitely.
boy, yeah.
And then the cop says it the last time. And then yeah, Candyman comes and kills everyone. And then that last line, just in that like Candyman voice, just says, "Tell everyone," and then the
Yeah.
movie just ends. It was just, yeah, super powerful.
Right.
Absolutely loved it. It brought everything together in such a intense, interesting way, and it just really, it was just, kind of a drop the mic moment. Just leaves you. Oh yeah, and then it like cuts to the those shadow puppet.
Yeah, the end credits.
Yeah, end credits,
I
and it just like was so cool.
I really appreciated basically like what you're talking about. I love the concept of saying his name and spreading the word. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's like it kind of ties into some of these social justice things of like
Mm-hmm.
spread the
Definitely.
word on what happened to these
Yeah.
people, like but instead it's like spread the word on
Yeah.
um you know this guy that's going to come and kill you, but it's still the same kind of thing. the that quote that I had earlier that I couldn't say was something about how Candyman is like he's America's racist past coming to
Mm.
haunt you,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the thing of spreading the word, spreading
Yeah.
saying his name and stuff, and um, ultimately the movie, I thought I loved the end. Like I loved
Hmm.
those last 20 minutes. I didn't love the like 20-25 minutes that came before that. Like to me, that's the kind of the part of the movie that got kind of clunky for me.
Yeah.
It was that actor. He's been in a bunch of stuff. Blanking on his Coleman Domingo.
Hmm.
He was the guy who like told Anthony about the whole myth in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
He kind of like it was ultimately like his plan to get Anthony to come back, and he wanted the police to come and kill him to spark like a new
Yeah.
Seaman mass murder streak, which is ultimately what happened. But his whole reveal kind of was a little clunky for me, but. Ultimately, it's one of those things where the ideas were there, and I love the ideas so much. I'm not that bothered with the clunkiness of it.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't disagree. That was one of the things I was talking about when I mentioned earlier that there was some clunkiness and some issues that I had with the movie. Um, but yeah, I think overall I liked I liked that. Maybe not how particularly how it was executed, but the idea of bringing back um, this urban legend for a new generation and a new time, and the twist of Candyman becoming uh, Candyman becoming almost a hero, a folk hero at this point. Um, Whereas the first one he's a straight villain. He's never really portrayed as kind of someone who's gonna save the day or anything like that. And I liked that twist of turning Candyman into this symbol of someone who can empower the community and can
Kill the racist cops.
yeah, well, that too. um but yeah, and it's symbolic in a lot of ways, one of which is giving folk tales and folk heroes what gives them power. And this was a theme all the way from the first one too. He's almost an urban legend or a folk tale manifested physically. And I like that idea again, like the past trauma, the generational trauma of hundreds of if it started with that first story of the painter, hundreds of years of trauma has been manifested into this one symbol of this character, the Candyman. And I really like that idea of bringing him into the new generation and kind of making him a symbol of power and a symbol of, yeah, I don't know.
No, I know what you mean. It's like he became an anti-hero. He
Yeah,
became
kind of.
and I think like I was reading about like the end credits that we keep talking about. They showed different possible Candyman. They showed the internet's calling it like the Candyman hive.
Yeah.
And the people that they, according to Wikipedia at least, they have examples of who those people are. I mean, one of them's Anthony, another one's Sherman from the first movie,
Mm-hmm.
but another one's George Stinney, and the other one's James Byrd Jr. And both of them are real people who were like James Byrd was murdered by 3 white supremacists in Texas, and it was a pretty brutal murder. And then George Stinney, I mean, this happened in 1944. He was 14 years old, and he was unfairly convicted of murdering 2 white girls
Mm-hmm.
and got the electric chair, and these are what they're saying are things that, like, examples of what could, turn these guys could turn into Candyman.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so interesting. One thing I've heard people say recently is they would that Candyman is the most thoughtful horror character, and the more I learn about it and the more I think about these movies, the more I agree with that. It's yeah, there's definitely a lot to this character, a lot of which has been, I think, also put onto the character as well, which maybe even adds a layer of it being more interesting.
Right. I mean, like this is a slasher movie,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, it's a slasher in the traditional sense, and it's like comparing to other slasher heroes or anti-heroes or villains, whatever you want to call them. It's like you got Michael Myers, who's
Mm-hmm.
basically nothing. There's
Yeah.
Freddy Krueger, who's a monster who kills you in your dreams, but
Mm-hmm.
I
Which
don't know if
is
he.
up there for those types of villains.
I mean, he's
as well.
terrifying, but
Yeah.
again, I don't know if I wouldn't describe him as thoughtful necessarily. And Jason Voorhees is like Michael Myers. He's a guy who wears a mask. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he was a kid who got killed at camp because teenagers weren't paying attention to him. But again, not necessarily metaphorical in any way.
Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying. That is pretty interesting to think about.
Yeah.
So. Hi, Shaun. I think we should wrap this up, though.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you wanna say about Seaman?
Yeah. I mean, I do think, tell everyone. I think it's a really interesting movie, and I think people should see it. It's entertaining. It's really thoughtful. It's really creative. It's visually something very interesting and yeah, it's something to see.
Well, Shaun, I'm glad you liked it so much. I mean, same with me. I echo everything you're saying, and yeah, I really liked it too.
Mm-hmm.
I hope people see it. Yeah. So next week we're gonna be doing Shang-Chi and the new MCU movie. What's it called? I'm pretty out of it right now.
Oh God, yeah. I'll look it up.
No, it's called Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Yep, there it is.
So that's the new MCU movie, and we're going to be talking about that next week. But I think neither of us are going to be on. I think it's going to be Derek and Brandon on that one. So that'll be next week, and I think I'm coming back in 2 weeks to do another horror movie. So
nice.
you know me with those horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. So anyway, this has been the Monthly Movie Dispatch. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe to us on YouTube or your podcast feed, and keep watching those movies.
Mm-hmm.